The future of work and leadership always starts with us. Welcome to the Dr. Ginny Show. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Dr. Ginny Show. Today we have a very special episode with Dr. Haley Perlus, and she's going to introduce herself. Hi, Dr. Haley.
Hi, Dr. Ginny. Yes, I would love to introduce myself with a story about how I got into my career and my first experience with coaching and leadership. It started when I was 12 years old, and I grew up in Canada, and I was a fairly good athlete growing up, and so my sport was downhill ski racing. And I was asked to go and compete in what would be considered the world championship for my age group. And I'm bib number 9, and bib number 8 is in the starting gate. I have about 45 seconds until it's my turn to go and compete. Well, in those 45 seconds, my coach, my leader, pulls out $100 Canadian bill, places it in front of my face, and tells me that he bet on me to win this world championship. He then tells me that he lost betting on a different athlete who was competing in a race the week before, a race that I was not in. And he looked at me straight-faced and he said, "I'm not prepared to lose today." He then unstraddled my skis because he was facing me, pointed me in the direction of the starting gate, smiled, and told me to go have fun. So in this moment, I am at an emotional and a mental fork in the road. And this is something you and I and everyone are in each and every day. On one hand, I could feel anger, frustration, worry, fear. How could my coach bet on me and then tell me right before I'm about to compete, what if I make a mistake? What if I let him down? But on the flip side, I could feel challenged and confident and passionate. If my coach believes in me so much that he's willing to bet on me, why shouldn't I believe in myself?
Beautiful.
Now, I can't tell you that at 12 years old and with the 10 seconds that I had left, I stood there and I said, "Haley, you are at an emotional and a mental fork in the road. What are you going to do to be your most resilient?" But I do remember thinking, wow, if my coach has high expectations, doesn't that mean I'm doing something right? So I went down, I won the event. My coach came down, congratulated me, kept the money for himself. But he looked at me and he said, "It's amazing what your performance can be when you get your head straight." And then 2 weeks later, he brought a sports psychologist to come and speak to my team. And I decided right then and there that I wanted to be a sports psych gal when I grew up. And I've always had a passion for coaching and leadership, hence this story.
I love that story, Dr. Haley, in so many ways, because your maturity at that young age of 12, you could have taken it the other way. You could have said, "Oh my goodness, how could he do this to me?" and become a victim at that moment and really ruined your race.
I could have, and I strongly believe that my coach had been training me to embrace pressure. My coach had been guiding me to rise to the occasion. He didn't bet on every athlete. I really, truly, and I would not recommend that all leaders bet on their, on their directs to that extent. But he knew me, he learned about me, and then he also encouraged me to rise to the level of this pressure, and he helped me to embrace it. Maturity, yes, but I do believe it was instilled, it was trained in me.
Yeah.
And then that's what I like to do for others as well.
And that's what we want to talk about today. We want to talk about resilience and leadership. And you mentioned a couple of phrases that I want to hone in or double click on. One of them was around pressures. So I wanted us to explore what are the pressures that you are experiencing right now with the leaders that you're coaching, the organizations that you're working with. And then on the side of resilience, we will then flip the coin to talk about what are the organizations and leaders doing to become more resilient as we are navigating so much challenge these days. I mean, I think any era you can look at and you can say we're navigating challenges. The complexity, I believe, continues to increase as the years go on because we have so many more factors that are part of the equation. So let's start with the complexities. What are some of those complexities that you're seeing in the environment right now?
Dr. Jenny, the thing about pressure is that there are complexities because there's 3 different types. And pressure, or if you want to use the word stress, we can use both words together, but there's 3 different types. There's something we call normal stress, normal pressures, and that's the wash, rinse, and repeat. That is the expected every day, the emails, the meetings, the getting your kids to school, just the day-to-day expected. If I had the energy, I could do this. Then there's the training. Then there's the pressures that are just above your current level of ability. And that's for people who are volunteering, and I say volunteer because they raise their hand, they want the leadership role. So they
Correct.
ask for the role, or they ask to lead a project, or they want to educate themselves on something in addition to help expand their career. That's training pressure. That's training stress. And then the third type is excessive. And that's when the demands completely outweigh our capacity. But it's perceived, right? It's the story we tell ourselves. And unfortunately, in today's world, we get them all blurred. And because we're low on energy, because we're overwhelmed, because we have stories that we're being asked to do too much with too little, everything seems excessive. So what I like to do is help people break down. Let's look at the demand. Let's look at the pressure you are experiencing, the specific. And let's really, truly understand, is it just normal? Is it your day to day? And we have to then approach it as such? Or is it training where we need to rise to the occasion and embrace it? Or if it's excessive, maybe there's some things we can do to modify it, to bring it down to a level of training.
I love that framework because I have seen cases where some leaders have been promoted and they've been promoted to roles that they were not ready for. And in a way that there were good intentions for those promotions, but there was no preparation. And in a way, we're not doing our leaders any favors because they end up failing, they end up quitting, they end up getting egg on their face because they just were not prepared yet to take on that level of strategy or responsibility or ownership. And that's why I strongly believe in mentorship. When we are able to take our leaders and mentor them so we can elevate them and help them gain the skills they need to deal with the pressures beyond the normal ones and to train, develop them so that they can gain that confidence and the know-how of how to navigate certain situations that come up.
Absolutely. And leadership is the ability to influence behavior change, right? That's what leadership is. It is not to remove stress from your directs. It is certainly not to again, it's to embrace the pressures. And so a leader has to embrace their pressure with the proper pressure preparation. There are tools, there are skills that you develop, whether it's communication skills, which requires both talking and listening. There's looking at a project and being able to either break it down into sizable chunks so you can focus on one at a time. There's the ability to prioritize. So leaders embrace all of these skills, and slowly but surely they can then endure more pressure. They can embrace more pressure. And well, then the world is our oyster, right? Then we can realize our true potential. But you're right, it's in the preparation, it's in the learning, it's in the training. So back to my story, I don't believe my coach just, by chance threw this experiment at me and saw what I could do. I believe he was training me all along to embrace pressure. And then I was ready for this moment and he put it on me and I succeeded because I was prepared to succeed.
Exactly. You had a certain level of confidence and skill that you knew you could handle it, which is the training pressure.
What I believe I was trained to do is he put an expectation on me. And that happens all the time. Leaders put expectations on others. And in that moment, I can speak out more eloquently now than I could when I was 12 years old. But in that moment, the question is, how have I earned that pressure? Well, I've earned that pressure. And then in my mind, I started thinking about all the successes that I have had. So he believes in me. That must mean that I'm doing something right. Well, I've won every race so far this year. And I have slept and I've eaten and I've, strong right now. And this is a technical course. I strive in technical courses. So all the reasons why I can, instead of all the fears, all the reasons why I can go in the driver's seat. And that is one great tool. When someone feels that they have pressure on themselves, that someone, maybe even themselves, has put high expectations, the best question you can ask yourself is, how have I earned this pressure?
I love that.
And then your mind goes to all these confidence building examples. And then that confidence increases motivation and focus. And then you go and make things happen.
Yes. And that is something I call self-acknowledgement. In that moment, you say, okay, what have I done that I feel good and confident that I can tackle this challenge? I really like that framework. We know that achieving is 80% mindset. If we believe that we are ready for it, that we have the resources, that we are learners, that we are, that we are curious, that we will figure it out. We lean into all our superpowers whenever we are facing that pressure to rise above it. I think we can switch to talk about resilience, because the mindset is what really makes you resilient. And the way that I would translate what you're sharing with us, Dr. Haley, into my language at Executive Bound is that there's always a pile of bad stuff and there's always a pile of great stuff. And if you take that about yourself, about the environment, about your team, you can always focus on what's broken and what's not working and all the things we have to fix. And you can also simultaneously access the pile that says, wait, what have we accomplished as a team, as a company, as a department? What hurdles have we overcome in the past? And how does that prepare us to then be able to face this and have some level of confidence that we're going to overcome? I love that mindset and resilience. How do you view resilience and how do you work with your leaders around it?
Resilience to me is not just bouncing back, but bouncing back with intention. It's being the best recoverer you can be. So striving for perfection is, I think, well, I strive for perfection. I don't know anybody who doesn't want to be perfect. However, I can never demand it of myself or others, because perfection is just not possible 100% of the time, if ever. So in addition to striving for perfection, and I say in addition, but I mean equally in addition, I want to strive to be the best recoverer I can be. So if I miss an email, or if I missed a question, the last thing I want to do is focus on that error. The best thing I can do is focus how I'm going to immediately recover using my strengths. So that's the intention piece. So resilience, we all talk about bouncing back. I like to add bouncing back with intention to be the best recoverer I can be. If I make a mistake or my team makes a mistake, there's opportunity to learn, but not in this moment. We need to quickly recover. And then at a later time when we can assess, we'll learn from it, debrief. But in the moment, I want to immediately recover. And you said a word that is my favorite word. You use the word curiosity. And I believe that when we create a mindset of curiosity, instead of judgment, when we create a mindset of curiosity, what can happen now? That can motivate us to recover. That can motivate us to be resilient instead of judging us that we made all these mistakes in this moment.
And stay there and fester and stew and ruminate. And these are tools. These literally are tools that we can apply daily in our leadership. And as we apply them to ourselves, I also want to encourage our audience to apply them to their teams. Because, many leaders are talking about executive presence and influence and how do you become more influential as a leader. You have to start becoming more empathetic and really seeking to understand your team, the people that you're engaging with daily. And rather than from an ego perspective, trying to look good and pretend you know everything, put on that learner's hat and that mentor's hat and seek to understand what they're going through. How is what they're going through impacting them personally, professionally? And I think when we extend ourselves from that perspective and also with that curiosity that you mentioned, then we become more influential because people realize how much we care. And there's a saying, I forget whether it was Maxwell or who said, people don't care what you know until they know how much you care. And that's really important.
It is by far the most popular piece of feedback. So in addition to corporate, I work with athletes and their parents. That is the number one feedback. My child knows you care. And then they're willing to listen. But you mentioned something about empathy and learning. If I had a recommendation, and I do it for myself too. In fact, I just had this experience. If I had a challenge for leaders, it would be while you're leading, be learning elsewhere. Be a student somewhere else so that you can be a better leader where you are. I just got back from a week where I was learning a new activity. I was learning a new sport. And I mentioned that I was a ski racer. It was like everybody in the group were on these double diamonds and I'm on the bunny hill, which for me is, I'm sitting here always being the expert. Well, I was certainly not the expert. And not only was I humbled by it, but I then therefore now have greater empathy for people who are learning.
Yes.
And I was able to learn and reignite that. And I absolutely believe that every leader should always be learning something in order for them to develop that empathy, as just an example.
Absolutely. And so many new team members who just joined the company, who just joined the organization, they're figuring things out and putting yourself in their shoes in a different context. I believe that's powerful. Thank you for that
Absolutely.
perspective. Let's dive into what are the biggest challenges that you are witnessing in today's environment from working with your clients?
With regards to that empathy piece and with regards to things not being perfect, I believe we want to give each other grace. And I do think that's important. Things, with new people in a business, for example, they are learning the ropes. They are figuring things out. And if you're a new leader, you are learning the ropes and figuring things out. So I'm a big believer in giving yourself some grace. However, I don't think we can stop there. We also have to bring about never let yourself off the hook. I think both are extremely important because if we're giving people grace, then how far does that extend?
Yes.
How far can that go? And then we end up taking on responsibilities that other people could be taking. And then we do find ourselves overwhelmed and burnt out, and leaders aren't leading. Now they're just doing. I do believe in giving each other grace and never letting ourselves off the hook. We all need to take responsibility. We all need to rise to the occasion. If you have 70% to give today, give yourself grace, but not let yourself off the hook, meaning you're coming to give 100% of that 70.
Absolutely. I had a conversation recently that resonates a lot with what you're sharing right now, and it was around ownership. How many of you in the audience have had a team member who was not owning what they were supposed to be accountable for? And what happens to the team? Everybody pays for that. One, you're not going to meet your deadline. You're not going to meet your deliverable. The team is going to be put out because now, since that piece is missing, you may be late or have to postpone a presentation to your senior leader. And now everybody is in a bad place, in a bad position. And so I love that the combination of give yourself grace, meaning not every day is going to be 100%. There's going to be many things happening potentially personally that may impact you professionally. Things may be going sideways professionally. A project that was on track, all of a sudden a vendor pulls out and now you have to figure out who's going to replace that vendor. So many things can happen. Obviously, the ownership is that there are no excuses.
Right. And we have to hold each other accountable. Great words, psychological safety and openness and vulnerable. That is important. So that's allowing people to speak their mind and speak their truth. That's giving each other grace. I don't want it to end there. Again, the accountability piece, the ownership piece, and that's actually for our own well good. It's a hard truth, but when we take ownership, when we take responsibility, when we do the job, that's the only way that we gain self-esteem. Self-confidence is not something we're just given. We have to earn it. We see this in babies all the time, learning to walk. They stand up, they fall down. They earn. So we need the responsibility. We need the ownership. We need the accountability because then we'll earn our confidence. So give each other grace. Do not let yourself off the hook.
Couldn't agree more. And when it comes to leadership competencies today, what are some of the competencies that you believe leaders need the most?
Speak less, more strategically. I find the best leaders are the leaders who, when they speak, their words mean something. And they may have to repeat and repeat and repeat, but speak less, more strategically. I really believe in communication. I also believe in listening, which is a hard skill. Listening is a very hard skill.
Especially for fast processors, people really smart and are processing information fast. I know because my clients usually are. It takes one to know one. Listening is such a valuable skill. And it goes back to seeking to understand than to be understood, to have the influence to address issues from an angle that resonates with the people you're looking to influence.
Absolutely. And when you listen, once the person is done speaking to you, take a pause. You just take it in so that when you do speak back, again, you're speaking less, more strategically. I also believe that consistency is a very important skill set for leaders. We need to be consistent. consistent in your behavior, consistent in your communication. And you and I know we both believe this in the top-down approach. Walk the walk, don't just talk the talk. Walk the walk and talk the talk. Be a model.
Yes.
Show up the way you would want your directs. You show up the exact same way. In addition to sport and business, I was a group fitness instructor, and I used to speak at these fitness conferences. And one of the topics I gave was, how to overcome the small class challenge, where you show up as the instructor and you only have like one or two participants. And the complaint is there's no energy because there's only one or two people that showed up. And that is the wrong answer.
Yep.
You are bringing the energy. You are leading. You have the responsibility. And I think it's the same thing with leaders. It doesn't matter what your team is feeling today. Your energy is what needs to be contagious. Your motivation, your focus. And if you can be consistent in that, your team will follow.
What I'm gleaning from what you're sharing, Dr. Haley, is that if your team is in trouble, I know this is going to be hard. If your team is not performing, if your team is not behaving in the way that you would like them to, the first person to start with is yourself. How am I showing up? How am I demonstrating the behaviors, anything that you're looking for in your leaders? How are you demonstrating that? And if you begin with yourself and that self-reflection, I believe you will get many answers to your question, because the easiest way to approach it then is to shift yourself. Notice what happens once you do in the people watching you every single day and seeing whatever you're doing as their permission slip to do it themselves.
Absolutely. I could not agree with you more. And it's okay. It's actually more than okay. It's acceptable for them to see you have a difficult day.
Absolutely.
You don't have to be perfect, but let them also see you be the best recoverer.
And how you recover.
Correct. Let them see the process. Let them see you having a struggle, and then let them watch you recover, because exactly, they're going to, well, that's your role. You're leading them.
Yes. And that would give them, as you mentioned, a role model. This is what happens when my leader is having a bad day. I can see it in her face or his face, and then I see how he can or she can express what is going on. So I have permission to do the same, instead of pretending that everything's fine when it's not, especially when people ask you, how you doing? And you say, fine. That is the worst answer in the world. No, we're not fine when things are not well.
Yeah.
Where do you see the greatest growth demand or opportunity for growth in the leadership development world right now?
I'm going to stick to my theme, which is teaching people how to embrace pressure as a performance enhancer. Really looking at pressure as an opportunity. Now, there's two things actually. When someone's feeling a lot of pressure and demands, the best question is to ask, how did I earn this? And if you can't find an answer, well, there's some assessment that needs to be done. Maybe you haven't had the proper training. Maybe you are not ready for that. Maybe you're not ready for that leadership role yet. Perhaps, it isn't the wrong timing. On the flip side, though, the greatest thing is not, this is too much pressure. They're asking too much of me. Wait a second. Why are they asking this of you? Is it because they believe in you? And why should they believe in you? Because you've already achieved this, this, and this. Going back to what you talked about, gratitude for yourself.
Yeah.
I've achieved this and this and this. And then embracing it, not what do I have to do? It's what do I get to do? What do I get to learn? How do I get to be challenged? How do I get to support others? So I want to really help people embrace this pressure instead of feeling the overwhelm, because the feeling of overwhelm, the anxiety, the anger, the fear, the frustration, that creates the emotional exhaustion, which then leads to burnout.
Yes.
Burnout is emotional and mental exhaustion, one of the three characteristics. And anxiety is one of the greatest emotional drainers. It's one of the energy drainers. So if we can look into our pressures as challenging and competence and with passion and alignment, we're going to conserve energy. And then that energy can be devoted to embracing it and showing up and making huge strides.
Now let's tie that with the reality of being overloaded, because I know so many of us these days are overloaded, overextended, where we're doing the jobs of 3 people. How? Because we had a team member who left and they were never replaced. We had a second team member who left and they were never replaced. And now our team of 3 is handling the work of 5. And so the communication that you mentioned earlier, being one of the greatest skills that leaders can have, is always having that self-awareness of, capacity, resources, like realistically evaluating, can we do this work with the number of people we have available? And if we can't, as an answer, how do we proceed? Who do we communicate with? Who can we go to for additional resources? How can we scale back the scope of the work that we're currently doing because it's not feasible for us to achieve it? That is one thing, Dr. Haley, that I found many leaders shy away from because they have this assumption that if they do that, they may seem incompetent or that they may not be well received, when in fact, the not doing anything, I believe, is what causes things to go awry, for projects not to be delivered on time, for initiatives to fail. And it's because of this lack of vulnerability that leaders are afraid for whatever reason. And it could be the environment not being psychologically safe to express that they have a capacity issue. So for the people that are listening, our dear audience who's listening, I want you to begin to think about this from your perspective, everything that we're discussing from your personal perspective, as well as the perspective of your teams. Because if we want to look good for the higher ups or the very senior leaders by continuing to stretch our resources so thin that they burn out, they leave, and you know this by attrition, you know this because people look like they're miserable. You don't need to look too far or do a deep analysis to notice that everybody's gloom and doom. If that is you as the leader, what is going on? Let's become more aware of that. And then if it's happening to you as the person who is in the receiving end of that, how can you empower yourself to communicate to your leadership and express the capacity issue or the resource crunch that you're undergoing and the impact that it will have on the project on your portfolio?
Now, you said something really impactful because there's fear of being incompetent, but by not saying anything and not doing anything, you will actually be incompetent because you're going to miss deadlines. You're going to miss the target. And so the very thing that you're afraid of is the very thing that will happen if you don't take effort to change the situation. And changing the situation can look in many different ways. Obviously, are there additional resources that you can reach out for? But then there's also coming together with your team and kind of accepting this is going to be a tough 6 months because we are doing the work of 5 people when we're 3, but we have to accept it. We're all in this together. I believe in preparation. You use the word preparation. I'm loving all your words, preparation, curiosity, but preparation so that we don't have 2 people on the same phone call ever. We're literally working as a team. You have this, you have this.
Divide and conquer.
Yes, absolutely. There should never be any redundancy when you don't have that you don't have that time or energy for it. So there's a lot of preparation, organization beforehand. But I do think that acceptance piece is a really big piece. A team of 3 could be going to work every day doing work for a group of 5. And there's a lot of, for lack of a better word, wasted energy being frustrated and angry and worried. If there's an acceptance piece, knowing that my leader is doing whatever they can do to figure this out and change the situation, while that's happening, we are going to accept that we are here. And that acceptance piece removes a lot of that unnecessary emotions that's draining. And then we can focus on the task at hand more effectively.
Yes. So I'm hearing from what you're sharing is how do we remove the clutter? How do we remove the emotional clutter that prevents us from really performing? And that takes a lot of intentionality, just to use the word that you used earlier. Being intentional about what am I focusing on? Where am I spending most of my time? And being honest with yourself. And then coming up with strategies about what can I do about these things? How can I offload them from my head and drop them somewhere so then I can have more bandwidth to process, find the solution, connect with that client, come up with a new process that will help us do this particular thing better and deal with whatever challenges I'm facing as a leader. That to me is like your daily hygiene. What is happening? Just like we brush our teeth every day. Where are my thoughts going today? What is really consuming me? And then doing something about it from a place of feeling empowered to do it, whether it's because you're reaching out to someone who can help you with that. A coach is a great idea, by the way. Not that I'm biased. And also even tapping into your network of mentors, your network of your peers who could be a mentor, and bouncing things off of them from a place of vulnerability and feeling safe and feeling like today's my day, tomorrow's your day, because we know that this is not the kind of environment where we can say, I have everything and I have it all figured out. If you're playing that game, I'm sure you have a lot of pressure right now.
For sure, and you'll be sorely mistaken. It is bringing the team together. Leaders, you asked at the very beginning, what else is pressing? I believe a leader bringing the team together, and I think that's more important now than ever because we work remote, many of us. So we're not really there to feel like emotion is contagious, energy is contagious. And when you're not physically in the same room together, it's hard to feel that unity. Team cohesion is essential forever, but even more essential now because we're not physically together. So I do believe that a leader's responsibility is to make sure that the team feels that they are a team. And there are many ways to do that.
I was going to say that could be an entire podcast. How can leaders bring their teams together and feel like you're all rowing in the same direction? And to that end, having that leader with a clear vision is so important. And when you mentioned before, speak less, more strategic, is that vision of where you're going, that is the more strategic part, in my view.
Yes.
Because we believe, I know the strategy. Yes, you do as the leader, but do your people really know the strategy? Do they understand what the vision is? And we cannot articulate that enough.
Yes.
So that they can also articulate it to others as if it were their own. Because guess what? If it's the team's vision, then it becomes every team member's vision and every contributor's vision as well, when you're able to articulate it and repeat that.
And to go even one step further is every individual can take their personal purpose, their personal vision, and see how they can be in line with the team's vision, how they contribute, how they relate, how they connect, which only brings about more intrinsic motivation, improves sustainability,
Yes,
longevity.
intrinsic motivation, to me, that's the goal. Because we know that there have been many cases where you have been promised a promotion, you have been promised a team member, you have been promised these things that they don't pan out for whatever reason. So if your motivation is external and that doesn't happen, what will happen to you? You're no longer going to be all in. But that
No.
intrinsic motivation, to me, is where the game is at.
Yeah.
The whole thing, to me, is an inside job. And when you are able to harness that self-leadership that includes your communication, how you view the world, your mindset, your values, your needs, and you harness that, then projecting that outward is trivial because you're simply exuding how you are inside externally to others.
That's the best work anyone can do.
Yeah. Dr. Haley, I know we're getting ready to wrap up. And as we do, I want to ask you some fun questions. What would you tell your younger self as you started out?
There's two things. And in fact, I actually believe that I learned the lesson. I had some great leaders and great role models. My father once told me that if I commit to the craft, the money will come. He did that for himself. Talk about the intrinsic motivation versus the extrinsic motivation. So that's the first thing. And the other thing is I'm a performance psychology expert. So I talk about goal setting, and something that I would definitely tell my younger self and something that I continue to tell myself now is have my goals, because goals provide direction, not so pigeonholed that I lose sight of other opportunities that I didn't know existed at the time I set my goal. Does that make sense? Have my goals, but keep a lookout for some cool things that can be the curiosity with the goal setting.
I so appreciate that comment, because the time when you made that goal, you had certain circumstances around you. And your goal could be even bigger, given the opportunities that you may run into that you had no idea would present themselves. I like that openness, that curiosity, that set the goal and keep a lookout. Keep looking out for anything else that could influence it and expand it.
Yeah, why not? What can happen? You just don't know. So keep an open.
And this is our last question for today. If you had no limitations of budget, resources, time, what project would you do? What would you take on? What would you create?
I actually think I'm doing it right now.
What is that?
And it's a lesson that I learned. I got a little sidetracked in my previous, probably about 7, 8, 9 years ago. I got a little bit sidetracked to go where I thought I should be. And now I'm going where I feel I'm supposed to be. And I don't know, I look at should and supposed to is a little bit different just in mine, but I can see how some people may think it's the same. For me, it's different. Should is what society tells me I should be doing, and where, maybe I'll make more money in this. But if money wasn't an option, it wasn't an issue, and resources, I really wanted to redirect my focus on what I feel I meant to do, which is what I'm supposed to do, which is what I love to do. and just focus on that. And I did make that shift probably about 5 years ago. And
It's all a journey. I have learned through the years, and I teach the members of my Elevate program, which is our leadership development cohorts. I teach them that the whole thing is a journey. There isn't destination. And I know when I say it, and they look at me, they're like, "What do you mean?" And it's the beauty, the growth, the life, the being is in the journey of the things that we are saying are our goals and who we become in the process. So I am so happy to hear, Dr. Haley, that you are on your path and you feel aligned between who you are and who you're being in the world, which sometimes, due to many different things, pressures, society, conditioning, we tend to not listen to ourselves. So the biggest takeaway that I'm taking for myself from listening to you today is this awareness of how come you have this pressure on yourself? What have you accomplished and done and become that the world believes you deserve this pressure that you may be perceiving as pressure, but in fact, this is what you were built for.
welcome to the club. Welcome to the Pressure Club. It means you have arrived and you made something happen in order to feel this way.
And for everybody listening, as I listened to Dr. Haley's story of being 12 and competing in the world championships and her coach betting and investing in her, all the time, energy that he had put into her and betting on her, in this case, literally, but in our case, figuratively, how are you all investing and betting in the people, the talent that is creating the work, the success, the business growth, the products, the services that you're providing right now? And we want to leave you with that question. Dr. Haley, is there anything that you want to leave the audience with? A few last words?
I think the way you just ended it should be how we end. I think you just wrapped that up in such a well-packaged message with a good bow on top, because it is how did we earn it and how can we use it?
All right, another wonderful episode of the Dr. Ginny Show. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening to us, for joining us today. I will leave all your information, Dr. Haley, so people can get in touch with you in our show notes. And we can't wait for the next episode of the Dr. Ginny Show. Have a wonderful week, everyone. If you enjoyed today's content, I appreciate your review so others can find us and share it with your friends. And to stay in touch, join our community to receive valuable strategies and expert advice at drginnybaro.com. See you soon.